All right, I don't see it picking up yet.
Looks like you went live. I see Shelby.
Excellent.
Oh, you can on the YouTube side?
Oh, they switched channels, I think.
So they swapped them?
I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, I see Amber's over on track 1.
Yeah, I see that. That should be okay. That link that he provided should be streamed to. Yeah, I see the three of us.
On the YouTube side?
Uh,
I don't see any.
check ops chat.
Okay. Oh, okay, we're going live. Okay. All right, Shelster, if you want to go, 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into my talk. So you want to be a red teamer? Sorry for the technical difficulties. If this is not the talk you wanted to be at, there should be another channel on YouTube. All right, let's get started. So just a quick overview of who I am. My name is Shelby Spencer. I'm currently a senior red team member at Fusion X, and I have about 10 years in red teaming and pen testing work in general. So today we're going to talk about what skills, traits, and experience I think are necessary for people to be good at red teaming and to get into that industry. So this will be kind of an overview of those tools and techniques, as well as like some advice for people getting started in the industry. Obviously, this talk is my opinions, and it's worth exactly what you paid for it, so keep that in mind. All right. So the first question you should ask yourself if you want to get into red teaming is, should you get into red teaming? And particularly, do you have the qualities and traits that are necessary to be good at this type of work? And a list of those traits that I think are really important are as follows. First, and this is probably the most important one, you need to be efficient at assimilating large amounts of new information. You're going to be going into environments all the time with technology that you've never seen before, and learning new techniques constantly as the industry changes. And you need to be good at taking in all that new information and figuring out how to weaponize it and use it effectively. So that would be my first key trait of a good red teamer, I think. Next is consistency. If you're going to be doing red teaming, you're going to end up doing a lot of the same type of things. Maybe you find some vulnerability in a client's environment, and it's a very manual process, and it's not something that's easily automated. And maybe there's 100 servers, and you know one of them is related to your objective. You might have to sit there and try the same manual technique 100 different times in a row. And you need to be the kind of person who can sit there and do that consistently. And when you're done, you need to be able to be confident that you've covered all of that ground in a consistent manner so that you can tell the client that for sure whether the vulnerability exists and be able to say that with confidence. So you have to be able to not just stop when it gets hard. And that kind of gets into the next point, which is tenacity. It's along the same lines. Just being able to be dogged about what you're doing, even when it gets boring, even when you're writing that 60-page report for the customer. The next skill set I think that's really useful is adaptability. Again, you're going to be seeing a lot of different technology and using a lot of different techniques that could vary very much from engagement to engagement. So one engagement might start as an external web application type test that pivots to an internal Windows environment. And then the very next engagement you're on might be, say, a social engineering engagement where you're doing badge cloning and walking in and attacking Mac computers in a zero trust environment. So being able to be flexible in the tools and techniques you know and how you apply them is very important. The next big one is stress management. This is definitely a very stressful job. You're going to constantly be going up against new clients where it's really important for you to make a good first impression. You're going to have tight deadlines and timelines. You're going to have put together exploits and chain them with very short amounts of time. And you got to be professional during that entire process. So being able to manage stress is definitely a key skill. And to that note, I noticed there's another talk today about burnout, which is related. And I definitely would recommend checking out that talk later today if you're interested in this kind of work, because it's a very real problem in our industry. Humility is really important, and more specifically, a lack of ego. You're going to run into things that you don't know and that you haven't seen before. And you need to be the kind of person who knows when they don't know something and can admit that and reach out for help, either from your teammates or from the internet at large. And just knowing what your limitations are so you don't break something, because you'll often be situated in a client's environment in a place where you could do a lot of damage if you're not careful. And knowing when you should stop and when you should take a breath is really important. And last, integrity. Obviously, the kind of work we do in any other scenario would be incredibly crooked, would be incredibly dishonest and bad. So it's important to maintain a good sense of integrity and honesty about what you're doing. You're going to be in environments where you could do a lot of damage or potentially steal millions of dollars. And it's important to keep the ultimate goal in mind, which is to help customers get better at preventing real bad guys. So if that's not you, again, don't do this type of work, because there's going to be a lot of temptation there. So now that we've covered these basic traits that are not so much skills, but just features of you that are necessary or will help make you a better red teamer, let's start talking about specific skills that can help you on your path. The first skill is programming. To be a good red teamer, you need to be a good programmer. You will constantly be in an environment where you need to quickly hack together tools, maybe modify existing tools to help you build payloads, or even just writing quick parsing scripts to parse large, gigabytes or even terabytes of data to find the information you need. So the first set of skills that you should be building if you want to get into this industry is that you need to be proficient with both Linux or Unix-y type tools and Windows command line scripting. So on the Unix Linux side, that's things like bash and awk, set, grep, cut, tr, those type of commands. There's of course many others that I didn't mention here, less, head, tail, all of those type of things that you will need to use. But basically, pick at least a couple of those tools that allow you to quickly parse text documents and pull out specific values, and get very proficient at doing that. A good way to learn this stuff is just pull down large data sets that are public and try and filter and cut out specific pieces of information until you can do that very quickly and effectively. On the Windows side, you really don't have any other options than PowerShell. The good news is, on both sides, these scripting languages are everywhere, and they can also be used offensively. So not just for parsing stuff, it's also useful from the offensive side to have a good handle on these languages. The next thing is you should have at least one popular general purpose programming language that you're very proficient at. So that would be a language like one of these. I've kind of listed them from left to right in terms of which ones I think are more valuable to know, but that's definitely personal opinion. You will find in the red team and pen testing world that Python is kind of ubiquitous, and it's also installed in virtually every Linux system you run into. So it's a very good tool set to have. Ruby is obviously Meterpreter, and that whole Metasploit framework is written in Ruby. So it's still pretty popular, though I think recently Python's been gaining a lot more usage. Perl is a good one just because it's been around forever, and again, it's on pretty much every Linux, Unix, and BSD box you'll ever run into. And lately, I've been seeing a lot more tools being written in Node. So pick one of those at least and become very good at it, and generally having a good sense of the other languages that I mentioned here is a good idea. And then lastly, make sure that you're proficient in at least one cross-platform compiled language. So that would be these type of languages. You should definitely be able to find your way around C and C++. C# is really good for Windows exploitation, and also you can, of course, run it in a Linux environment using Mono. Golang is great because it's hard to reverse engineer and it's cross-platform. It's very easy to write code that will work everywhere, and that could be a really valuable tool when you're breaking into various environments. And then lastly, Rust is starting to gain some traction, so that's possibly another good route to go. So after programming, let's talk about kind of another more general skill, which is generalizing your knowledge. The majority of red teaming, in my experience, is knowing how to ask the right questions and then where to find the right answers. There's just too much information for you to know. You can't know everything about what you're going to face. So being able to find what you need to know on the internet and ask the right questions is really important. And the more tidbits of general knowledge you have, the more programming languages you understand, the more systems you understand, the easier it is for you to ask the right questions. So again, instead of focusing too much on knowing all the details of a couple things, try and learn a little bit about everything that's related to your industry. Kind of the opposite of that, it's a good idea to specialize in a couple areas. And that's particularly useful when you're trying to get a job. The reason for that is companies love to have people that are experts in very unique areas that they're likely to run into. And it greatly increases your value in an environment to an employer if you can look at if they can go to you for one or two areas that they're likely to encounter. And some of those areas might be one of these. There are others, but here's kind of a list of things that you might want to specialize in. So again, if you look at this list, these are definitely areas that not every red teamer has a lot of skills in, but you could make a name for yourself in, and that you're likely to run across. And this is, again, one of those kind of general things that I've been kind of hitting on before. This is generally a good life lesson or skill set, but it's very important in red teaming. You should always be asking yourself, what do I have and what do I need? Those two questions will help you chain together your various exploits in an environment and help you be effective at achieving your goals. I'm not going to get too much into the differences between pen testing and red teaming, but definitely in the red teaming world, you're very much more goal-oriented. It's not own everything. It's find a system of weaknesses and vulnerabilities that you can chain together to get to your objective. So being able to think tactically like that is a very valuable skill set, and these questions will help you do that. All right, the next skill set, hacking the human. Hacking systems and finding vulnerabilities in software is a lot of what we do, but honestly, we probably spend 3/4 of our time going after people because humans don't get regular firmware updates. So they're a lot easier to go after. So what I mean by that is learning how to exploit human psychology. So that includes things like understanding how people pick passwords, and particularly how they pick weak passwords, how people tend to take passwords and duplicate them across environments, building effective phishing lures. And all of this requires you to make peace with the fact that hacking humans is not nice. You're taking advantage of psychological vulnerabilities that we all have. You're taking advantage of pressure points. And you need to be able to make peace with that idea that you're doing something that's fundamentally kind of sleazy, but you're doing it for good reason. So along those lines, you need to be able to build rapport. That could take the form of multiple emails back and forth, building some camaraderie with a potential victim before you send them a payload. That could be being friendly and setting someone at ease if you're doing a physical penetration test. So learning those skill sets and being able to make people feel comfortable around you and feel like they can open up to you is definitely a good skill set to be developing. Along those lines, you need to be able to have empathy for people. Not only does this help you abuse the psychological weaknesses that we all have, but also it's good to understand the psychological impacts of that kind of work so that you don't do more damage than you have to, and also so that you can have compassion for people who are that you're exploiting. All right. The next skill set, and this is particularly important as we'll see in getting a job, but professionalism is very important, and there's really three intersecting areas that it comes into play in red teaming. The first one, like I said, is the job interview, an employer relationship. Being able to be professional in an environment where there's a lot of stress is very important to being in this industry very long. There's going to be lots of opportunities for you to want to tell a client or or even your boss to screw off when you're stressed out and they're making a quote unquote unreasonable request. So learning to be professional in that environment is a good skill and one that I fail at sometimes. We all do. The next one is customer interaction. If you're going to be presenting your findings to customers on a regular basis, so your boss needs to be able to be confident that if he puts you in a boardroom with a CEO, that you can conduct yourself in a professional manner. And lastly, phishing and social engineering. If you understand what is expected in a professional environment, if you understand the social norms, you can learn how to subvert those and take advantage of that when you're doing your phishing and social engineering. And kind of a side note and related thing that I think is very under talked about in our industry, your public image matters, and it matters more than in most industries. And I'm talking about things like Facebook and Twitter and those type of places. You might feel that we should, I don't know, eat the rich, but that's probably not a good sentiment to be expressing on Twitter if you're trying to get a job in an industry where you're very likely to find yourself in a position to completely burn down a Fortune 10 company. Both your boss and those customers need to feel like they can trust you with that level of power. And if you're constantly posting things on Twitter about, I don't know, eat the rich, again as the example, it's going to make it much more difficult for you to get a job in this industry. So think about that kind of stuff, especially if you're new to the industry. Start building that professional image outside of work as well. The next skill set is good report writing. This is another one of those things that I think gets under talked about in our industry. But report writing skills are critical. And as my first boss used to repeat over and over again, what you do on a red team engagement is of absolutely no value if you cannot clearly and concisely explain that process and the impact to customers through a report. I've memorized that phrase because I've heard it so many times, but it is really true. The report is ultimately what the customer is paying for. So keep that in mind. If you don't have good report writing skills, now is a really great time to start building them. It's important in this industry in general, but more so in red teaming than pen testing even. In pen testing, a lot of pen testing is kind of checkboxy and kind of a Mad Libs of I found this exploit, this vulnerability, and I reported it across the environment everywhere I found it, and you just slap in a general finding about it. In red teaming, you're going to be doing more and more one-off customization, and so your impact is really going to be writing up these customized findings and helping the customer fix them. And so being able to convey that very well and carefully in a report is a very important skill to have. Keep your knowledge current. There are several tricks for this, but the industry is constantly changing. You need to know the tools, and you need to know where to keep your knowledge current. One of your big tools in this area is RSS feeds. They're your friend. I highly recommend checking this link out. It's a current list of all my RSS feeds that I use, and it's a really great way to stay on top of things with an RSS feed aggregator. Obviously, NetSec on Reddit is a great tool. There's lots of good stuff that gets posted there. And finally, InfoSec Twitter. You can say what you will about InfoSec Twitter, but it's definitely one of the first places that a lot of great new techniques and tools come up. So let's talk about interviewing. This is information I wished I would have known when I first started. So if you're getting started in the industry, here's some useful stuff you should know before you walk into an interview. Know how to fish. Know what tools currently work and what techniques. This is hard if you haven't been doing it, but just read as much as you can on that kind of stuff. If you're still talking about how you use word macros in 2020, 2021, you're probably going to get some eye rolls. Talk about how to evade AV and EDR. And this is just know the general techniques. You don't have to know a lot of specifics, but it's a good idea to know some specific techniques that work against specific AVs as well. It gives you something to talk about and shows that you've thought about it. This last one here is really important. Have some well-rehearsed vignettes of exemplary prior work that you've done. And if you don't have industry-specific work, try and pick some things that you've done in related industries and then have some strong tie-ins to how that knowledge or learning experience can help you in this industry. That gives you a way to demonstrate your value outside of whatever, canned questions they have for you. And it also gives you a way to kind of filibuster if you get to a question or area that you just don't really know what you're doing. If you can tie that into some related experience and talk about how that knowledge could help you in this instance or teach you how to do this thing, that could be really helpful. And always admit when you don't know, but also don't stop there. Describe how you would find out. A lot of times you're not going to know the answers, and that's okay. We, as red teamers, we never know all the answers when we go into an environment. So know when you don't know, be willing to admit that, but then also explain how you would go about finding that information. Be passionate. This work is hard and it's soul-crushing sometimes, and it's really important to demonstrate to a potential boss that you have a desire and a real hunger to do this kind of work, because otherwise they know you're going to get burned out quickly. And so it's really important to show that passion in an interview. And then last, kill your ego, bury it in an unmarked grave. No one wants to work with somebody who thinks that they have all the answers, because they don't, and they're going to do crazy things that are going to cause problems. And egos cause problems in a team environment when your team's really important. So try and work on being open to admitting when you don't know things and working with your coworkers and asking for help and demonstrating that in an interview. A lot of times we have dismissed people who are otherwise talented in interviews simply because they would lie about knowing stuff that they clearly didn't know and pretend that they had more skills than they obviously did. So again, back to admitting when you don't know. All right, I know we're kind of tight on time here, so I'm going to kind of blaze through some of these slides quickly. But advertise yourself. LinkedIn, seriously, that's where I've gotten most of my work. You'll constantly get headhunters. It's kind of annoying, but it's a good way to find work. InfoSec Twitter, if you have built a following there, feel free to reach out to people and tell them that, hey, I'm looking for a job. Anybody have anything? Talk to your local hacker community. Make those connections. A lot of times those people will have open job recs that they're trying to fill, and they can hook you up. And then consider related work. Things like pen test puppy mills are also an option. It's a good way to see lots of new tools and techniques and lots of new environments and build those professional muscles in an environment where it's stressful, but you get a lot of work. So finally, good luck. It's a hard industry to get into, but it's a very rewarding industry. I have a question slide, but apparently we don't have time. But feel free to reach out to the committee, and I'm sure they can get them in contact with me. They can get your questions to me, and I'd be happy to answer them. So thanks, everyone, for your time. I appreciate you listening to my talk.